Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And today we are talking about the archaeological park of Paestum.
We are indeed, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. But before we get into it, we want to thank everybody who has been following the podcast and leaving reviews. It means so much to us, and it also very much helps us out in the algorithm. If you enjoy this podcast, you can follow us and leave a review wherever you listen. You can also find lots more information, like what we're talking about today, on our website, onlyabag.com, and you can also contact us there if you have any questions. You can find us on Instagram at onlyabagpodcast. We don't post things at all, but we are there, and I will respond to your questions, your messages there if you have anything that you want to reach out about. And if you want to help out the podcast, you can click any of the affiliate links in the description of this episode or any episodes or on our website. We're not representatives of the companies, but if you book anything through those links, we will get a small kickback from the company, and it helps out the podcast a lot.
I think the technical term is commission.
Thank you.
Just because kickback, I don't want anyone to think kickback.
Really good point. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. I'm just keeping on rolling.
I love it.
If you want to donate directly to us, you can do so at ko-fi.com /onlyabag.
Thank you all. Commission.
Okay. I just want to say that out loud again to myself.
Oh, okay. To make sure. Just in case I didn't want anyone thinking like, oh, kickback. I wonder if this is some sort of scheme they've set up.
But yeah, no. It's not a scheme. We're not scheming.
We're not scheming.
So thank you, everybody who has donated, who has followed us, who has contacted us. It means so much.
And who has booked through the affiliate links.
Yes.
Thank you all so much. We really do genuinely appreciate it. And we hope that this episode you will also find useful.
Yeah.
We've wanted to talk about, the archaeological site of Paestum for a while now. And today we're actually going to talk about, I think, safety. But it was a heavier episode as we were doing the sort of research and background for it. And we realized with everything happening right now, it's a pretty stressful time, for lack of a more maybe appropriate word. It's a very tense time. I think everyone's feeling pretty tense. And we thought, you know what, something a little bit more, I don't know, just a little more upbeat.
A little more lighthearted.
Lighthearted. There we go. A little bit more escapism. We thought maybe it would be better, I think, for the day, if that makes sense. So we hope that this does fill that. If you have that need for it, we hope that fills that need slightly. I just know that every time I open Reddit or any news website or anything, it's just sort of horror and badness and more horror and badness. So we hope that this is not either of those two things as we get into it. And it's, I guess to start, since I'm doing the history, which is this episode will cover mostly the history. I wanted to find the perfect way to sort of phrase this, this place, but essentially it is a surprising archaeological site in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
It's connected to a modern town.
For sure.
It does feel like it's in the middle of nowhere.
And I think, that's a really good point. I meant, I guess, Pompeii is a little bit outside of Naples, even historically. So you could kind of imagine that, like, okay, I can see this being a resort town, especially, obviously it was a resort town for the Romans coming from Rome, but you can still see how, but it has, activity from this large, beating heart of Naples. And I think when you think of Paestum, which is south of Salerno, south of Naples, it's just north of the Cilento. We've talked about this kind of region before. It's a bit of it's almost like there's not much happening there. I mean, there's tons happening there, I should say.
But there's not like a major city necessarily associated with it at all.
There isn't. It's also, I think we've talked about in the past that Salerno is the last major city on the western side of Italy before you pretty much hit Reggio Calabria, which is the very southernmost point. So it's kind of like this. There's not like, I'm going to go and, be near there. I think we've talked about this in relation to the Cilento, which we haven't really done a dedicated episode. I think we've talked about Scario once, which is a seaside town in the Cilento. And this is on the way. I know that Trenitalia has been trying to put more effort into advertising it and we'll talk about that, I think, actually in the next episode, but making it easier to get to. So with this very weird little foundation out of the way, what even is Paestum? I think is a great question, dear listener. And it's currently an archaeological site. It was previously, though, a Greek city. It was one of the earlier Greek cities in Italy. It's part of the Magna Graecia. So it essentially was Greek, and then over the years, as we'll get into, it has changed hands, and then now it's just, I think, not even Italian. It's just there.
And before it was Greek, there were Lucanians living there?
So this brings us, I guess, to that first little fun piece of information, or not information, the fun piece of the
History?
history. Thank you. It was founded as its own city from Greek settlers from Sybaris, which is in sort of in Calabria, southern Italy.
Okay.
Essentially, they were like, we're just going to kind of go and make a new city, as one does back in the day, I guess. Not much else going on. And they chose kind of an interesting point in the terms, it was near the mouth of the Selle, or Selle, S-E-L-E, it's a river. And I think in Italian it's Selle, but I'm not sure. In English, I think we just say the Selle, like the last E was kind of dropped off there a little bit.
Selle. I don't know.
And so it's near the mouth of this river. It was on the coast. It was originally a little bit closer to the coast. And I think like recent-ish, in the last 50, 75 years, excavations have found they kind of pulled the city back in the middle of making it because and I'm wondering if it's just simply, bad storms or something like that. And they realized, what are we doing that close to the...
Sorry, interjection. It's
Yes.
it's kind the modern day Paestum is kind of on the coast, right? It's not like the archaeological park butts up against the coastline.
Correct.
But it is along the coast.
It is along the coast.
Okay.
It's also, and if anyone's confused as I talk about it, it's a bit of an interesting geographical situation because over the years, and I'm talking the last 3,000 years, silt has built up from that river, the river Selle, and sort of created a wider plain. We've talked about this before too, with like earthquakes that will sort of shift the ground slightly and all of a sudden either deposit more silt or sort of push things up and create a deeper, a shallower sort of ocean or sea, I guess, since we're in the sea. So it has changed over the years, and I know that, as we'll talk about too, the archaeological park has a museum, and they try to figure out what did it actually look like, because clearly some of this was like the ocean, the sea, excuse me, was used as part of like, the trade routes.
Yeah,
but right now it's a little bit kind of far, like it's just a pain,
It seems like the sea would have arrived closer to ancient Paestum than it does now.
Or there's something buried closer to the sea.
Sure.
It feels like one of those two, because if it's like that perfect distance where it's not like you're not far enough away for it to make a difference for anybody invading, which again, we'll actually talk about in a minute, but you're far enough away for it to kind of just be a pain to walk down to the sea kind of thing. So it's like, just put it closer. So that is where it is geographically located. And that was built by the Greeks in around 600 BCE. And so they did live in relative harmony with the sort of Lucanians, they're all grouped under a larger, broader language name called the Oskans, which would have been anyone kind of speaking this language, basically, sort of generally grouped together. Lucanians would have been one of them. So this would have been separate in case, I guess, y'all know your history. There were other tribes at the time, basically living in sort of the more native to Italy tribes. The Lucanians were kind of native, but also kind of had already pushed out the tribes themselves.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So
okay.
it's a little bit of like, they're not as original as, I mean, they're much more original, but they still were settlers in their own rights.
Right. Okay.
I believe the Enotrians it has one of those fun little O-E-O-N is how it's the beginning of it's spelled.
Oh, is that like when they're squished together in the...
No, it's just O-E-O-N. I think it's
okay.
Greek. So I'm like, O-E-O-N? O. So Enotrians.
Okay.
So it's founded year 600 BCE. Greek settlers basically named this town called Poseidonia. I'm not sure where you put the stress. Poseidonia. So you get it.
Poseidonia is how I would say it in
Poseidonia, actually. So I'm not even reading my own notes here. It's Poseidonia.
Yeah,
but it's after Poseidon. And actually it wasn't renamed Paestum until much later by the Romans when they took over. But it changed names like kind of frequently, not frequently, a couple times over its lifetime until it became Paestum, as it is still today, which is obviously not very Italian sounding. So it was a major travel and trading hub for like about a couple 100 years, 200, 300, 400 years, basically. But specifically during the Greek rule, it had a huge boom in essentially trading. I mean, it was just, if you're going north-south, it was an easy place to stop along the port. They had a lot of trading with the Enotrians inland. They traded with Lucanians. They traded with essentially anyone who was coming through, it was a super easy way to stop off, offload, onload, and then keep going on your trip, especially for the Greek settlers who were already spoke the language and wanted to use, I guess, their fellow country people. So after about 200 years of its founding, we're talking 400 BCE, skipping through some fun history here. It depends who you look at. It's one of those things that's not really well documented, that part of history. So there's no proof of a military conquest. There's no like swords and sort of mass burial sites to any troops. There's nothing that really denotes like, oh, there's a massive battle here or some sort of conquest. But it looks like it became Lucanian, not Greek. Some people think it's just over time because there were so many more Lucanians living there than Greeks anyway, that it just sort of slowly became a Lucanian city. Okay. As people were like, okay, well, we need to live somewhere. We're going to live there. And it slowly, Lucanians were, they did have a brief flirtation with democracy that I think ended, definitely ended when the Romans came through. But before then, had a very interesting sort of flirtation, I think, with democracy. They were just like, this is kind of fun. And no, the reason we know that the Lucanians were even like that much in control, for lack of a better word, is all of a sudden the art style shifted, and a lot of the art had to do with horses all of a sudden, which the Lucanians loved horses.
Okay.
Riding horses, painting them, riding horses, just paintings of horses. It was like the extreme home makeover sort of thing where there was like, we heard you like horses, so we decorated your room to look like a horse.
All horses. Okay.
All horses. And I think that's kind of, that was the level that they were like, oh, this must be Lucanian. That being said, though, at the time, there were still clear Greek elements, whether it was the sort of red paint pottery, the coinage, a lot of the architectural styles were still Greek. So they're clearly either there were still Greek people living in the city or, like artisans, so clearly doing Greek style, or at least the Greek style still existed. Again, no one was writing these things down, so it's hard to know. So it's a bit lost to time. Then the Romans took over 200 years after that. Really, it's like clockwork. Every 200 years, somebody else is like, it is my turn to run this city. Okay. Romans took over, but they were very polite about the whole thing. Surprisingly. I know, right?
Okay. I'm making a dubious face.
You are. I know. So they essentially turned them into a bit of a naval state, like a naval vassal state type thing, where there essentially was like, you do whatever you want to do. This is your city. Good luck. Have fun with it. But what we are asking of you is your ships and your sailors for when we need them. Not always, but we will probably need them because we're going to be getting into all sorts of wars.
As they do. Yes.
As they do. So that is essentially the arrangement they had. It turned out to be very profitable for both sides because during the First and Second Punic Wars, specifically Lucanians, but from Paestum, gave tons of ships and sailors to the cause, and helping win. Like a lot of historians think that it definitely helped win the Second Punic War, which I think is fascinating just because, I don't know, it's interesting like what that one little thing, for want of a nail, the war was lost sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So there was a kind of same thing of like, oh, yeah, it's kind of cool. Like this one city making some ships that ended up helping a war. But they also, when Rome was sieged by Hannibal, they offered all the gold they had. They were like, hey, if you need money, we got money. We also have grain. The Romans were like, no, thank you to the money. Can't eat that. Thank you, though. But we do want your grain. We would love the grain. We are starving. So they sent the grain. And after the siege of Hannibal, which I guess the Romans won, they decided to reward Paestum. And it was a fascinating. And I, if you're listening to this and you're like, I know history more than these people, which is a very probably, a lot of you. It's fascinating because what they rewarded them with was the ability to coin their own money. So at the time, it had just been like in the last, I think, 10 or 15 years prior to this, the Senate had centralized all coinage, like basically all coinsmithing, currency creation in Rome. They're like, this is where it's, so any coin used has to come from here. But Paestum was one of the only, if not the only other place allowed to smith their own coins and use them in the greater Roman Empire. Oh, wow. And they actually had a little like inscription on them basically saying, made in Paestum, but still good everywhere. Yeah. Sort of,
that's neat.
So I thought it was kind of a fascinating way of looking at it, if that makes sense. And then kind of comes the gradual downfall of Paestum, unfortunately, like any city. And I say gradual because I think when you're looking at Pompeii, it was sudden. overnight, and
Right.
then it was
And there's a
preserved
very
perfectly.
obvious, yeah, exactly.
And it's very obvious, and but it's also perfectly preserved, and it was like this sort of almost lucky that it was perfectly preserved for the future generations, not
Right.
for them.
For archaeology,
Sucked
not for
enormously
human life. Yes.
for them. But I say that now because over the years, I think with Paestum, it's sort of hurt. It was basically hurt by this. But it essentially started with, interestingly, the creation of two roads, Via Appia, the very famous Via Appian Way, and Via Popilia. I'm not really sure if I'm saying that remotely right. Via Appia, if you do not know, it is a very famous road connecting Rome to the Adriatic, but you can still walk along a pretty decent portion of it today. Just outside of Rome, there's a sort of archaeological park / just park where you can walk around along part of the old Appian Way, and then there's also like a road on the other part of it, so it just sort of ends. But I think like sometimes like on Sundays and stuff, they'll make it so it's walking only, which is really nice. And then there's Via Popilia, which actually interestingly passes through where we are, but it connects Rome with Reggio Calabria, the south, and it goes inland rather than along the coast, mainly for, I think, just ease of building a road and a fence, and it's not as difficult as putting it on a place where, storms and seas and shifting sands might wash away part of the road.
Do you think, too, that it was also influenced by existing towns and cities that might have been inland?
It definitely could have been, and that's a great question, because at the time there were a lot more towns like Agropoli and Paestum were already on the coast, so it would have been easier to put a road through there.
Okay.
Versus inland, I know even where we are according to the historical documents, was a very difficult stretch of land to put a road through.
Oh, okay.
So I'm kind of curious if it really was just a level of like point A to point B. Let's not because it's kind of also like if they had gone along the coast, as you might see, if you look at a map of Italy, you and dear listener, you'll know that if you go south of Paestum, you hit Agropoli, and that's kind of the start of the Cilento. From there, it kind of juts out. It's almost like a very wide, short, squat peninsula. Like rather than the nice long spindly ones like Amalfi Coast or something, it kind of goes out, down, and then back in. And actually, even if you look at the train doesn't even go out there. The train will go through the land and then mostly under the mountains, and then it pops out near Sapri, which is kind of where the Cilento ends. So I think it might have just been a simple act of like, dude, if we go around that, it's gonna be a nightmare to build, versus just simply going straight through and calling it a day, which I guess is what they did. So those two hurt a bit. It wasn't like the death knell of Paestum, but it definitely led to a drop in trading and a drop in sort of fame. However, it was still well known. Virgil apparently wrote about it, calling it the city where roses bloom twice, which I looked into because I was kind of curious. It has less apparently to do with the fact that it was warm. I don't know anything about roses, so I'm like, do they bloom twice when it's warm? Apparently it has to do with the specific cultivar found in or that was found in Paestum and is now pretty common, though, apparently, in like a common variety of rose that you might find at like your hardware store. It will bloom twice in a year versus one time.
Cool.
Yeah, so
that's interesting because the last time I was at Paestum, there's a small rose garden and it's beautiful, but that makes sense that it would be there. It's like it's reminiscent of the
what
ancient,
they're sort of
the old
loosely
roses.
famous for.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I thought that was wild. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, over time, it did sort of disappear. Part of it had to do with the river. It was a bit of an ungainly river, as rivers tend to be. And so it kind of went where it wanted to go. It pushed a lot of silt through the town. It flooded the town frequently. It also mixed with the fact that the town is quite close to the sea and was already sort of sinking. So mixed with silt coming and it's actually naturally sinking a bit, it made it so genuinely it was just sinking extra fast, or it looked like it. They did try to remedy this by raising the road. They tried to raise the doorways of the doors to try to raise up the houses slightly, but at least you might have to step over something and go down into your house, but at least your house is still there and maybe not as flooded. They did all sorts of things to try to preserve the city for as long as possible with, sort of, we're talking about like 800 AD to like 1100 AD in here. So they really did as much as they could. They dug tons of canals. They found some sort of tunnel linking one of the temples, I believe, to either another temple or to the town. It was this 50-meter long underground tunnel to collect rainwater, to also again, I think not necessarily even use it, just to kind of get it out of the it was basically a sewage system type thing, like to figure out what are we doing with this? Because I mean, again, I keep saying this in episodes, we come from Savannah. And one of the big issues is there's not a huge gradient between Savannah and the river or the ocean. So when you do have big storms come through, it takes forever for the water to drain. And they have put millions of dollars into their sewage system, like short of pumping out the water, which they do in some parts. It's just, it's the perfect gradient and this and that. And I think that's what they were trying to do here with like, we need to do something. It's not flowing to the sea. We're practically at sea level. It's like not flowing anywhere. It's just sitting here. Mixed with the fact that the water of the River Selle was very rich in limestone, as it still is today. The area around us is very rich in limestone, or the water is. Everything is calcified all the time, including, apparently, that was something they were dealing with constantly. So anything left in the water, anything that was, if the river's flooded, it was just oh, here's another nightmare to deal with. This was mixed with the fact that there were, one, I think everyone says it was quickly becoming a marsh, but it feels like that was already marsh behavior, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it seems like it was already being a marsh.
Right? Like it was already fairly marshland at that point. But it was quickly becoming more of a marsh. And I don't know if that means I don't know if that means there were more tidal pools all of a sudden, or if it was like there was more standing water or mosquitoes. But there's also a ton of, apparently, raiding and from pirates and from slavers. So they decided to essentially at some point uncamp, like just leave, and they went to Agropoli, which apparently
all of the people living there, essentially.
Rest of the people living there, yeah.
Okay, got it.
People who had not already left because they were like, this place is just the worst. So they all went to Agropoli, which was higher and more easily defensible, which actually, interestingly, did end up falling to pirates at some point, and then back under sort of a governmental control. But they just decamped and just like, you know what, we're absolutely done. And at this point, Middle Ages, right? So 1200, it sort of disappears from history for a bit, which is fascinating because I think we mentioned that there are 3 massive temples there. I don't know if I already mentioned that. If I have not, we have not mentioned that. So that's I could have put that right at the beginning. Oh,
we'll talk more about them in either the end of this episode or the beginning of next episode.
Probably put the teaser at the end of the episode for the next episode. Sometimes I'm telling a story and I'm just over here and I'm like, I can think, I'm like, the listener's like, what am I going there for? Is it even
some marshland?
Some marshland? Are you telling me to go visit this marsh? Oh man, I'm sorry. Burying the lead. It's like 20 minutes in this episode. So there are 3 enormous Doric temples that Darcy will tell us more about in the next episode, I believe, that still exist today. And they have always existed. I mean, since they were built, they never came down. Nothing happened to them. They just are still there. So when somebody says, we kind of lost this city, it's a little bit kind of crazy to me just because I'm like,
people just stopped going or visiting and living there?
That's kind of it. Like when the last people left, they just left and it kind of turned into a ghost town. And then obviously we talked about this with the pyramid of Cestius in the Off the Beaten Path episode. It just got overgrown. So people kind of just stopped like realizing there was something underneath. I mean, it's a giant pyramid. So it's not, I don't know how overgrown it had to get.
It's the same with the temples. The temples are, they're temple sized. They are massive, but people just stopped worshiping there. And if there wasn't anybody living there anymore, they just became not visited.
Yeah.
Just wild.
Exactly. And it basically popped up here and there over the centuries. People had mentioned it like, oh, I found some temple, like explorers. I'm putting these quotes around it because I don't know if that counts as exploring, but whatever. So explorers say I found these Greek temples deep in the jungles of, southern Italy, which again, at the time, if there's nothing there, it might have been like,
that must have been wild to see.
Yeah. You're going like an hour and a half. You have to go north of Agropoli to the plains where you could find this thing, but you have to go, and I'm just like, how do you miss it? Like, anyway, doesn't matter. Point is, it was missed frequently. And it wasn't until the 1700s, actually, when they rediscovered Pompeii and Herculaneum, that people were like, wait a second. This reminds me, there's also some ruins, actually, south of here. So they kind of rediscovered these ruins. And a lot of explorers, and again, I'm putting air quotes around this word explorers, mostly English, came and did etchings and sketches to sort of share around. And it sort of caught like, there was a bit of like the Paestum wildfire fever kind of thing happening where it was just everybody wanted like, oh, Paestum. And it actually made it onto the Grand Tour, which was obviously the well-to-do, I think it was mostly English, but well-to-do European men would sort of take these like, these tours of Europe to learn manners or something. I'm sounding yeah. I looked up the Grand Tour to make sure, and it was just it's like
Yeah, the posh people sent their male children to go get culture and music and arts learning.
And a lot of them were
language learning.
dumbfounded by the women, apparently. That was a big part of it. Like, everyone was writing about the women, especially of Venice. So, I don't know. I at some point...
Probably an indication of the type of person who was sent on this Grand Tour.
That was the thing. So, the Grand Tour typically ended in Rome. Some people would go farther south to Naples, especially if they wanted to study music. And then when there, obviously, especially once Pompeii and Herculaneum were rediscovered, they would visit Pompeii and Herculaneum. And, of course, when Paestum was rediscovered, they would kind of tag that into the end of their trip as well. So it did have a bit of it's like it re-entered the conscience, like the sort of collective consciousness, and never really left. Even actually in World War II, I thought it was fascinating because there are photos from World War II in the Museum of Paestum, and the Americans actually landed the Allied invasions, specifically the Americans. I think it was the 36th, what an interesting word, Infantry Division landed there, and there was about 9 days of heavy fighting, bombing, artillery, whole 9 yards. It was quite brutal, according to the sources. And the Americans succeeded in pushing the Germans farther north while they sort of camped in Paestum. But specifically, the 3 temples were off-site to bombings by both sides, so no one was allowed to bomb the temples. And so the Americans turned it into a Red Cross first aid tent center. So some of the photos from the museum are essentially of like beds and bandages and things like just essentially the temples themselves were like sort of no-go areas in terms of aerial warfare. So it was like one safe spot to be. So I thought that was fascinating how it kind of maintained its I don't know, like not even usefulness, but like it started as a holy site, sort of ended as like not ended, it still
like
exists.
As a place of protecting people.
Exactly.
And healing people. Wow.
So and I guess as the end, it does still exist today. You can visit. We're going to talk about that. But also, it's still quite unknown. Like maybe this is the first time you've heard of it. If not, you might have heard about it in passing or heard about it when you Googled like what to do in southern Italy. It is a stretch what to do in southern Italy. I'll be honest. It is well known, I think, for its natural beauty, but there are very few other things here. So I think that the Paestum kind of stands as the one where you're like that. Like I could see this somewhere, like, this, I don't know, just feels incongruous with where you are, like in a place that has very little other sort of like human-made creations. It also has these kind of crazy 3 temples that you'd be like, this would be better outside of Rome or something. Not better, but more appropriate.
It's more easy to imagine something like Paestum to be outside of Rome or outside of certainly a big city that has been continuously functioning rather than a town that was somehow like forgotten for a long period of time and then quote unquote rediscovered.
Because again, it's not like Pompeii or Herculaneum where it literally was covered. It was just sort of
in the wilderness because people weren't living there.
And there wasn't a road by it, and just like kind of, I guess, just didn't see it. And I think it's also interesting again when Pompeii and Herculaneum were rediscovered, people were like, I think there's some ruins in the south. Y'all should explore those too. While you're here with money, so you might as well toss some money down there. I assume there was money involved. It was like, I don't know. I've seen Poirot. All these excavations have money involved, and then they sort of sell the things they find or preserve some of them. So in my mind, I don't know. I think that's fascinating. Where it just sort of disappears off the map. It's, and just, I mean, again, once you start looking for it, then it's easier to find. Like even these sort of quotes of like, oh, how do you lose something that Virgil talked about, or was mentioned in these biographies or these sort of collections of history and geography. And sometimes I feel like too they were not. It's not like Paestum has a sign outside that says this is Paestum.
Right.
So you have to kind of guess like based on, okay, they say there's 3 temples, they say there's this, they say there's that. I think it's this city. I mean, like there's literally nothing else around here that far away from Agropoli, which is still, obviously there and exists. So I wonder if it's just like that process of, I don't know, elimination or rediscovery that is like, it's got to be this thing that they're talking about.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Absolutely wild.
So I hope that at least the history was enjoyable in some ways. I know that sometimes listening to somebody go on about history is not. I'm trying to learn how to make it more interesting, but I realize sometimes I forget the most important parts of why you should do something or see something.
I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
And in the next episode, we're going to be talking about not only how and how to get there and tickets and all of that, sort of practical stuff, but a little bit more about what exactly you can see when you go.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it because this time we at least have a goal in mind.
Okay. All right. We'll talk to you on Friday. Tanti abbracci.